Hi, welcome to Pop Culture in a Bottle. My name is Daniel, and today we're going to be talking about a pop culture phenomenon, the Batman, as an example of the relevance of theological and ethical reflection. Firstly, why Batman? Is he really a reflection of popular culture? To answer this question, we need to step back a bit and discuss what popular culture actually is, so that we can then identify whether the Batman really is an example of popular culture. In many ways, popular culture defies definition because new examples of it are always appearing, more so since we entered the age of mass media. However, there are some basic underlying concepts that form the generally accepted criteria for popular culture. Gordon Lynch, for example, tells of three ways in which popular culture has been defined. Firstly, as an opposite culture to high culture. High culture being things like opera, fine art, etc. Things that are generally difficult for the average to low income earner to access due to expense and time constraints. Secondly, pop culture tends to displace folk culture. An example is that generation-specific music is becoming more common in developed countries than folk music that traditionally was enjoyed by whole families across generations. Thirdly, as a form of resistance against mass culture, for example the punk rock movement and the indie music scene. The difficulty with these definitions, however, is that in the age of the internet, elements of these three things, which popular culture has been defined as a reaction to, can now be found within popular culture itself. Batman's certainly no exception to this, particularly as the franchise owners have successfully used mass media to further its influence. Perhaps the most workable definition of popular culture that I have found is that of sociology professor Tim Delaney, who, in an article for Philosophy Now, says, "The term popular culture holds different meanings depending on who's defining it and the context of use. It's generally recognised as the vernacular of people's culture that predominates in a society at a point in time. As Brummett explains in Rhetorical Dimensions of Popular Culture, pop culture involves the aspects of social life most actively involved in by the public. As the culture of the people, popular culture is determined by the interactions between people in their everyday activities. Styles of dress, use of slang, greeting rituals, and the foods that people eat are all examples of popular culture. Popular culture is also informed by the mass media." Using Delaney's definition, it seems reasonable then to assert that in order for a subculture to be considered part of a popular culture, as opposed to being a niche or emerging culture, it needs to be popular with a large amount of people and to have a resulting impact on people's lives by influencing them into some sort of action. So, does the Batman franchise fit these criteria? Well, Batman is popular with a wide range of people, of all ages. It's not uncommon to see both adults and children wearing clothes with the Batman logo on them, and most toy retailers around the world carry Batman branded stock. On top of this, Batman is well represented across the various forms of modern and traditional media. According to ComicVine.com, Batman appears in 11,344 comics, and on top of that, Batman is one of the biggest names in the graphic novel market. The franchise owner DC has not just stuck to Batman's birth media though, they've branched out into novels, poster art, TV shows of varying quality, digital games, and then they've stomped all over the box office with some of the most commercially successful films in history. In addition to this, many unofficial websites devoted to Batman lore exist. There's even a small but growing number of non-fiction books and academic texts with Batman and his fellow superheroes as their subject matter. It's not uncommon to see children pretending to be Batman, running around in their cape and mask, fighting over who has to be Robin this time. Adults too, though, are influenced into action also, as they purchase Batman merchandise, pay for their movie tickets, and while there are only a few people that see fit to dress up and practice vigilantism as defined by Batman, I am sure that my brother is not the only parent who tells his children he is Batman. Batman, it seems, represents a strong and by all appearances still growing subculture, one that's driven by mass media and a clever marketing strategy. So it's interesting to note that the academically dubious Wikipedia currently reduces popular culture to simply being a marketing tool. I don't think we should take this definition as gospel regarding the be-all and end-all of popular culture, but it does highlight a truth that is evident to all parents of children clamouring to buy the latest Batman digital game, right alongside Miley Cyrus's latest venture into the world of adult entertainment for children. So who is this Batman character? What's all the fuss about? Batman is the vigilante alter ego of Bruce Wayne. Bruce is a billionaire via his inheritance of the controlling stake in Wayne Enterprises. When Bruce was a young boy, he was with his parents when a street thug shot them down in the alley. This version of the story is repeated in many Batman stories. In fact, often a new Batman storyline begins with a retelling of this scene setting murder with minor variations. Depending on the story, at some point in Bruce Wayne's life, a bat makes an impression on him, by either flying through a moonlit window or mass swarming him with other bats in a dark cave, etc., leading to him to choose the bat as a symbol to strike fear into the hearts of the criminals Batman chases. Another common theme in these stories is young Bruce travelling the world, learning the skills necessary to allow him to defeat criminals, putting himself through all sorts of trials and tests in order to become a walking arsenal of pain to anyone on the wrong side of Gotham's innocence. After many years, Bruce returns to Gotham, takes on the vigilante guise of the Batman, and proceeds to attempt to clean up the city. Unfortunately though, the criminals in Gotham are a persistent and adaptive lot, and while the so-called low-life scum are being picked off the street by the Batman, a new breed of villain emerges, supervillains to rival Metropolis's own Lex Luthor. In fact, I don't think I would want to get between Lex and the Joker, even with Superman and Batman in the same room. As it has grown older, the Batman franchise has become increasingly popular and its audience has widened as the superhero genre has matured. In the process, Batman's been through many transformations, and not the usual ones for an aging gentleman either. The original creators of Batman, Bob Kane and Bill Finger, first presented the character to readers in Detective Comics number 27, way back in May of 1939. Now we've established what popular culture is, as much as we can define it. You have at least some idea of who Batman is. By the way, he's not real. He's a fictional character, I think. The next step is to look at some of the theological and ethical implications of Batman, a franchise so prolific that here we will really only scratch the surface of its potential for theological and ethical reflection. I want to return to Gordon Lynch's work at this point, to adopt his definition of theology, to guide us through this process, because it's particularly relevant to our interaction with a popular subculture like the Batman franchise. Lynch says theology is the process of seeking normative answers to questions of truth and meaning, goodness and practice, evil, suffering, redemption and beauty in specific contexts. We can see here a link to the ethical considerations we make as people following Christ. The definition of theology Lynch presents identifies with our struggle to determine what is good and what is evil, what is true and meaningful, and then what is actually practiced, whether for good or evil. Taking Lynch's definition, we shall use it to look briefly at two broad contexts that interrelate. Firstly, the fictional in-world context of the Batman storyline. Secondly, the real world, which looks into or upon the story. It's the latter realm that the reader, viewer, and marketer of the story exist in. But it is the first that through escapism, the reader or viewer enter into. These two contexts have within them their own subcontexts that also reflect our theological reflection on the franchise. Let us begin with the story itself, because let's face it, like most pulp fiction, Batman is much more enjoyable when we simply let ourselves indulge in a little escapism, immerse ourselves in the setting, allowing ourselves to forget what is happening in the real world. Here in Gotham City, we find a dark, brooding atmosphere. It's a world we usually see at night. Tall, shiny towers with glittering lights, dark, shadowed streets with prolific graffiti and rubbish bins overflowing down decidedly dangerous-looking alleyways, which good people have to walk through to get anywhere, and often find themselves set on by murderous thugs in the process. Just when we're fearing for our own lives, as a group of masked men are approaching us, with knives and guns outstretched, darkness falls from the sky with a swoosh, and a flapping like that of 100 birds fleeing a predator. Within seconds, our would-be attackers are being flung against the dumpsters, surrounding us by a flickering shadow of night that has come alive. Suddenly the alley goes quiet as the last of the gangsters run away, leaving his knife behind him in a last-ditch attempt at self-preservation. Now we know the Batman is real, and now we know there is someone looking out for us. During the next day, we bump into a drunken Bruce Wayne, who's just dived into the decorative pool with two minimally dressed young ladies at the hotel where we work. An irresponsible playboy who never worked for anything his whole life. We can't help but be jealous of his wealth and his life of ease. We wonder what the Batman would make of Bruce Wayne. You see, as a citizen of Gotham, we don't know that Bruce Wayne purposely acts out the life of a mega-rich playboy in order to enable Batman to exist. As Batman, he protects the innocent, but are his motivations pure? Does the motivation change the good that he does? What about the law, which he works outside? No wonder the Batman story involves a lot of justifications. It effectively creates reasons for Batman's actions. The reason for his indulgent lifestyle as Bruce Wayne is that it creates a cover for Batman. No one would expect such a benign and uncaring person to be spending his nights protecting the innocent and downtrodden citizens of Gotham. Bruce is travelling the world as a young man, learning all manner of defence and stealth skills is because he is equipping himself to be able to get revenge for his parents' death. As Batman, he acts outside the law because the police force in Gotham is corrupt. And, interestingly, even his collaborator, the veteran soldier and police commissioner Gordon, has had to do the same in his attempt to clean up the corrupt police department. In fact, Bruce Wayne even uses the combined hacking of every citizen in the city's phone to track a criminal, much to the ethical disgust of his outfitter Lucius Fox, who challenges him on this. But even then, it's passed off as okay because he's only going to do it once to capture a really bad guy, and afterwards the program that allowed this to happen is destroyed. After all, isn't it like Batman doesn't have morals? He doesn't kill people, unless they happen to fall off the building when he's fighting. He avoids guns in most stories, except for some of the very early ones. We also have to concede that while he's originally driven by a need for revenge, he has come to care about Gotham itself, and he has a desire to make it a better place. He's even willing to sacrifice himself for the good of the city and his costume sidekicks. Unfortunately for him though, these sacrifices usually go wrong and result in the making of another psychopathic villain, Two-Face being the classic example. So Batman's looking out for the poor, defending the fatherless, seemingly doing the James 1:27 thing, but he struggles like we all do with the keeping himself unstained by the world clause at the end of the verse. He's acting outside the law, and as Nolan's film The Dark Knight highlights, he's setting an example which really is not that helpful. People are copying him, trying to be Batman types themselves, taking the law into their own hands, and in the process not just getting themselves hurt, but also hurting others, and crossing the lines that Batman simply wouldn't cross, despite both opportunity and serious temptation to do so. Lynch discusses truth and meaning. As citizens of Gotham, though, we can't know the truth about Batman. It will leave him too vulnerable, which is understandable. After all, you wouldn't want the Penguin to have your address and phone number. He does give us meaning, though, and that meaning is profound. It has a huge effect on us as citizens of a dark city. There's peace and comfort in knowing that someone or something is out there looking out for us. The peace and comfort that people find in this is akin to seeing Batman as a reflection of Christ. And one would have to say that in this sense it is a positive reflection, even if it is not an obvious one. Another two qualities that Lynch links together for our theological inquiry are those of goodness and practice. Initially, Bruce Wayne's driven by revenge, and the scriptures are quite clear in their discouragement of such motivation. But Bruce's concern for Gotham grows during his time as Batman, so much so that in most modern representations of the Batman story, this is his paramount concern, albeit still keeping the revenge option open in the background. Bruce wants Gotham to return to a place of goodness. Unfortunately, though, it seems to only become darker and more evil. It seems to breed criminals of a more extreme nature each generation, with the rise of the supervillain repeating itself many times throughout Gotham's history. So in practice, the work of Batman doesn't actually appear to have a huge impact on generating goodness, or on opening the door for goodness to flourish. The growth of vigilantism is also a result of Batman's practice, something Batman's not wanting to encourage, but is compromised in addressing through his own actions. So there's some hypocrisy present in Batman's attitude towards other vigilantes, but one that we, as both citizens and interlopers in Gotham, accept simply because of the problems that arise around these other vigilantes. After all, they're not trained and equipped like Batman is. They lack judgment and restraints that Bruce imposes on his Batman alter ego. The fact remains, though, that with Batman, it's very much a case of do as I say, not as I do. Lynch also mentions evil, suffering, redemption and beauty as being issues that are for us to consider in our theological analysis of popular culture. The Dark Knight's history certainly has a rich interaction with all of these facets of human life. Evil is very much a part of the rise of Batman. Bruce Wayne reacts to the impact evil and suffering has had on his own life by painstakingly moulding himself into that walking arsenal of fear that he targets at Gotham's underworld. Despite this, however, evil grows. The suffering of the residents of Gotham is relieved only in short-term bursts. Unfortunately, being a normal citizen in a comic book world is not a nice place to be. Criminals seem to rule the roost despite the presence of Batman, driven perhaps by external factors outside their world, such as marketing and media drive. The characters of Gotham's underworld are repeatedly superseded by arch-villains, maniacal characters who even exceed the Klingon Empire in their thirst for conflict and conquest. So Batman's approach to crime is not to turn the other cheek. His approach appeals to the human side of our nature, but it doesn't appear to be helping Gotham over the long run. In fact, it may even be escalating it. as it seems some criminals act in order to get their own revenge on the bad. Redemption is a concept that occurs frequently in the wider comic book and graphic novel genre, with characters such as Ghost Rider, who sells his soul to the devil in order to receive supernatural powers, and then uses those powers against evil, and Hellboy, who is in fact a demon drawn into our world by the Nazis for their own nefarious purposes, but is rescued and brought up by the Allies, and is now working for good in the world. In Batman, though, redemption is not so obvious. In some versions of the story, Bruce Wayne is himself a criminal, and has done some unlawful things, but these versions are not that common. If there is redemption in Batman stories, it tends to be the criminals who are the recipients. Selina Kyle is probably the best example. As Catwoman, she is a dangerous criminal, but occasionally Batman somehow manages to turn her for good, and so she is redeemed. For much of Batman's long history, though, she has fluctuated between being an ally of Batman and an enemy. Driven by passion that often takes the form of greed, she has a love-hate relationship with Batman. Occasionally the recipient of redemption, she is always the representation of beauty, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. She is, though, perhaps the most redeemable of villains appearing in the franchise, and one cannot help but wonder if this is because her beauty does not allow the writers and producers to write her off as truly evil. Harvey Dent, who usually but not always becomes the supervillain Two-Face, is the opposite, and the Nolan films depict this particularly well. Harvey Dent is the White Knight of Gotham. He is the beauty of law and order. Harvey presents a handsome and swashbuckling figure that refuses to back down to crime and corruption. Unfortunately, he is also in love with Bruce Wayne's purposely estranged lover, and this inevitably sets them on a collision course. Through the intervention of perhaps the number one supervillain in the history of the Caped Crusader, the Joker, the woman is killed, and Harvey Dent is torn in half, both figuratively and literally. As one side of his face is eaten by acid, he mourns the loss of his lover, and Batman becomes his arch-enemy. The beauty of the law now becomes the evil suffering of, and caused by, a psychopathic maniac, and this is symbolized by the physical loss of looks. The opposite of Catwoman, it seems that Dent has lost his redeemability along with his looks. Is this the nature of the dark and depressing Gotham on good people? Is it a subconscious view of the world that the writers and producers ascribe to? Or are we just reading too much into a fictional story? It's certainly worth thinking about. Which brings us to the punishment of these supervillains. Occasionally one of them will die, and so in a roundabout way receives their punishment. However, because Batman doesn't purposely kill people, and in fact he often goes out of his way not to kill people, these arch-fiends usually end up needing to be dealt with by Gotham's criminal justice system. In Gotham's case, they usually means they become a prisoner in a place called Arkham Asylum. This rather creepy looking prison appears to model its practices on the straitjacket and electric shock era of psychological treatment, and as far as I'm aware, has had no lasting success in treating mental disorders. In fact, occasionally one of Batman's enemies escapes, and appears to be, if not more insane, just as mentally disturbed as when they were first incarcerated, and they are always more determined to do something terrible to both Batman and the citizens of Gotham. So there really is not expected to be any redemption for these villains within the Gotham universe, and there's almost no expectation that mental illness be cured, either for the sake of the prisoner, the city, or the storyline. Arkham Asylum staff are certainly not concerned with ethics, and the very nature of the place is one of holding people who the authorities and citizens of Gotham deem as being of little more worth than animals. Out of sight and out of mind appears to be Gotham's view on the mentally disturbed, particularly those with criminal tendencies. On that morbid note, let us remove ourselves now from the world of Gotham and take a look at some of the external theological and ethical issues arising from the Batman franchise as a whole. I've already alluded to some of these in the previous discussion, the most obvious one of which is that the impact of marketing on the subculture influences and hampers the direction of story development and the general design of the Batman saga. The original Batman storyline, as written by Bill Finger and drawn by Bob Kane, was a tale with a sad beginning but a hopeful outlook. A boy sees his parents killed in a supposedly random mugging, decides to exact vengeance on criminals, in the process becoming Gotham's defender, and moving beyond mere revenge. The bat is specifically used as a symbol to create fear, to protect Bruce from suffering beatings at the hand of intervening bystanders, who are too fear-struck and awed to respond. His aim of cleaning up the city, though, as we mentioned, never happens. The city, if anything gets darker, experiences more crime. It would appear that this must be so, because if the Batman were to clean up the city, there would be no more stories to tell, especially since the tales of the Batman rely on retelling his origin story for much of their content, Each new telling, whether graphic novel, comic series, movie or TV show, returns to tell Batman's tale of how he got started in the vigilante business. Then it relies on having villains for Batman to deal with. So as the villains are caught, more villains must be created. Batman's a marketing tool. It's not designed to be a single story of how one man cleaned up a city. It functions by being the continual focus of more merchandising and more tales of Batman's uphill struggle against crime. It's a syndicated feature that needs to be continually retold and more episodes made in order to keep the income coming in. This has an ongoing effect on the story plot by placing certain expectations and limitations on the writer's work. For example, while Batman himself remains human, the villains get more and more crazy in order to outdo the last villain. And so in turn, Batman's response must become more complex and more impact on the audience. Is it a sellout? I'll leave that to the viewers to decide. The Batman comics and graphic novels also have attracted criticism for their depiction of violence. In 1954, Dr. Frederick Wertham published a book entitled Seduction of the Innocent. It was aimed at comic books in general. His credibility took a hammering in the eyes of most comic book fans when he made the ill-advised assertion that Batman and Robin were gay. However, it is true that these forms of media frequently contain graphic violence. The violence criticism has gained a higher profile in the last decade, following the relatively low age ratings given to Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. In particular, the second and namesake movie for the trilogy, The Dark Knight, has come under criticism for its rating, which allows children over 12 in the UK and over 13 in most of the Western world to watch it unaccompanied by an adult, and for children under that age to watch it with an adult present. These are serious concerns, and parents in particular need to consider any film carefully before allowing their children to view them. This was an action that some commentators have linked to Ledger's on-screen portrayal of the Joker. Blake Kopnick summarises the more balanced of these arguments by saying, movies don't make us go insanely violent, but if you're going to lose control anyway, they provide a model for how to go about it. A model for just how bad and mad today's crazy person is supposed to be. It will never be anyone's fault but Holmes for his actions, but those of us who are parents or caregivers need to ask ourselves what the impact of specific media portrayals is on the people in our care and under our influence. A considered approach to this might be to use movies like The Dark Knight as a discussion point for issues like violence, justice and hope, among many other things, with the young people we care for, those whom we deem mature enough to view the content. So in summary, Batman is a significant subculture of today's wider popular culture, and as such has provided an example of the relevance of theological and ethical analysis to popular culture. The Batman franchise was chosen because it appeals to a large group of people spread across a wide age range. That being said, it's important to realise that it is a franchise, and as such it's also a marketing exercise, and this affects its storyline and development in particular ways. However, Batman does present opportunities to ask questions about the portrayal of goodness and practice, truth and meaning, evil, suffering, redemption and beauty. We've highlighted particular ethical issues, including the challenge to writers to consider the impact that the need to be part of the marketing process is having on their stories, the outdated treatment of mental illness in Gotham, and the associated pessimistic attitude to the recovery of these patients, the portrayal of violence in popular media, and the responsibilities of caregivers to consider the influence of media on those in their care. The world of the Cape Crusader in Gotham City is growing all the time. The lore associated with it is written across many thousands of pages of comics, books and the web. This program has only touched the surface of the possible areas of theological and ethical reflection. The Batman franchise provides some possibilities for further study and consideration. These could be the depiction of women characters within the Batman franchise and the wider comic book genre, gender variations in the following interpretation and interaction with the Batman franchise. The impact the franchise has on people's view of the justice system and its authority over individuals. If and how the Batman franchise shapes or alters people's views on vigilantism. And in the wider sphere, the relationship between mass media and popular culture. The concept of Batman as a superhero is an interesting one, because Batman himself has no superpowers. He is in fact just Bruce Wayne dressed up. He hasn't been bitten by a spider and given extraordinary natural abilities. He isn't from another planet, and the Earth's atmosphere doesn't make him any stronger than anyone else. He is, however, ultra rich, and that is what allows him to become a superhero. He's able to devote his time solely to preparing to be the Batman. He has technology that even Scotty wouldn't understand. Yet he is still human, and somehow he always overcomes, except for that one fateful meeting with Bane. But no spoilers here, please. There is an interesting discussion about what would happen when Batman and Superman meet in a fight, which of course is bound to happen because they're fictional characters and everyone wants to know who beats whom, just like they want to know whether the elephant beats the rhinoceros or something equally pointless. The interesting thing is that when that story was written by Frank Miller of 300 fame, Batman won. And why did Batman win against the Man of Steel, who's faster, stronger, and even, dare I say it, more intelligent than our beloved Cape Crusader? Because he'd planned for it. Bruce Wayne's a pessimist. He expects the worst, and he's a detective at heart. Hence he appeared in Detective Comics. He worked it out in advance. It had probably never occurred to Superman that one day he might have to fight Batman. But Batman was betting on having to fight Superman. Or, is that really the reason he won? Is it maybe because he's human? Because he's one of us? We want to be in control of our destiny? The same thing that attracts us to evolution means we want, despite all appearances of strength, skill and intellect, Batman to win. Sorry Superman, the odds of a popular story about you beating Batman being written are slim. Let's face it, it'd just be too easy anyway. Here you see me scrolling down Wikipedia's list of Batman comics. Not individual comics, actual series of comics. And as you can see, it's a long list. Scrolling, still scrolling. Oh well, you get the point. There's also a long list of TV shows with the Cape Crusader in it. And Batman features in numerous movies, including the recent Lego movie. It's a great movie. One would have to say that with 5 dedicated Batman movies and the 100 top-grossing PG-13 movies, and 2 of those are 4th and 5th place respectively, Batman has certainly made its mark on cinema. And the franchise's target audience appears to be youth. I enjoy all things Batman, but the best parts of the franchise from a consumer perspective are certain movies and of course the graphic novels. Batman is the graphic novel subject par excellence. The darkness, total overwhelming desperation of Gotham's plight, and the depressed and somewhat kamikaze way that Bruce dresses up as a giant rodent to protect his city is the perfect subject for the genre that brought us the bloodthirsty 300, V's for Vendetta, The Walking Dead, and of course Tank Girl. If you want to check out some Batman graphic novels, I recommend starting with 3 of Frank Miller's own books. Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, Batman, The Dark Knight Strikes Again, and his collaboration with David Mazzucchelli entitled Batman Year One. Once you've devoured these, move on to Batman The Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. Batman Hush, also by Jeff Loeb, collaborating with Jim Lee and Scott Williams. All of these books are available now on Comixology, so sometimes it's cheaper to buy them in that digital format. For something a bit different, check out the recently released manga, Batman Death Mask by Yoshinori Natsumi. Just remember, even though it's written in English, it is in manga format, so you need to read it from back to front, otherwise you'll spoil the surprise.